Hello and welcome to the Scoreboard Podcast. I'm your host, Boord of Jets X Factor, the home of the best New York Jets content on the internet. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to jetsxfactor.com, discount code 80, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so now I'm on. I just figured I'd come on to talk with you guys a bit about the Jets, about the 49ers game, about the upcoming Titans game. No notes. I normally bring on some notes about what I want to talk about. This time, no. I would appreciate it if there's anyone in the comments or anyone listening who can let me know if you can hear me, because I've had some issues with my mics, as you probably know if you've ever listened before. So yeah, I mean, obviously not the outcome the Jets wanted on Sunday, not the outcome they wanted, but not the way they wanted that outcome to come. I mean, I kept saying pretty much the whole offseason that I just wanted to keep that 49ers game close. Like, I didn't care so much about obviously I wanted the Jets to win, but more than anything else, I just wanted the outcome to be close. And instead, it just wasn't close. It was a mess not from the get-go, but pretty much, I don't know, late first quarter for the rest of the way. Halftime already didn't look good. By the middle of the third quarter, the game was essentially over. I mean, the run defense was certainly a concern, but once you heard Christian McCaffrey was out, you hoped that the Jets could contain Jordan Mason. Instead, now you look at that game and say, what would have happened if Christian McCaffrey had been in there? I mean, Mason ran for 147 yards. You can just imagine what would have happened with if McCaffrey had been in there with those holes. I mean, Mason, I think forced 9 missed tackles. McCaffrey would have had 15 the way the Jets were tackling in that game. I would say besides the run defense, you knew it was an issue, recognizing how big of an issue it was. You didn't realize how big of an issue it would be. The bigger issue, I think, over there was more just the most disappointing part of this game was how the run blocking was. I didn't think Brees looked very good either. I get that the holes were not there, but I felt like he didn't do his run blocking any favors at times. Like, there were times where, let's say, he could have gained maybe 4 or 5 yards, and instead he gained 2, or just generally did not look as smooth as we're used to Brees Hall looking. But nevertheless, I mean, every AVT had an awful game. Tittman was pretty bad. Simpson had his bad moments. Morgan Moses was stood up. There were times where Tyron didn't get to the second level quick enough, and particularly interior guys were really bad. AVT was a massive disappointment. And just their inability to run the ball kind of killed their whole offense. Now, it didn't help that they were also they were running run pass all the time, especially running on second down, 2nd and 7 or 8 didn't really make much sense. But still, I mean, the whole goal of the game kind of was to establish a run, keep the ball out of the 49ers' hands. Instead, the opposite ended up happening. 49ers like, we'll keep the ball out of Rodgers' hands because they just kept running the clock. I mean, the Jets, had 49 offensive plays, something like that. Rodgers attempted 21 passes. So, I mean, the whole game was just a complete disaster. And, again, in terms of Hassan Reddick, you were hoping that against Colton McKivitz, at least they could get some pass rush from the other side, but nothing. I mean, even the pressures they were credited for were not much of pressures. There was one time where Solomon Thomas came through that it looked like he was going to get a sack on Purdy, and even then he missed, and Purdy was able to get the ball off to Debo. And so other than that, I mean, they had like a couple of 1 or 2 coverage sacks, if you can even call them that. One of them, Purdy got back to the line of scrimmage. The other one was he couldn't find anywhere to go, so eventually he was just tapped down, and then they celebrated as if it was some big deal. It was a disastrous game. Like, no one really played well. Now, the only positive thing coming out of this game was that Rodgers looked good. I've heard a lot all over the place about how Rodgers has he's rusty. Rodgers can't play anymore. Rodgers looked bad. The Jets are in trouble. I even saw one fantasy analyst say that they're out on Brees Hall because Rodgers is immobile, and so their run game is going to be bad. I mean, did you watch the film? What does a quarterback's immobility have to do with a run game? Yeah, I get he's not Jalen Hurts running the zone read, but I mean, since when was Aaron Rodgers ever that? And I seem to recall, I can't recall a time where Tom Brady, who was just as immobile as Rodgers is at this stage of his career, I don't remember Brady ever affecting his run game or whenever suggesting that he affected his run game. Peyton Manning, for most of his career. Eli Manning for most of his career. These quarterbacks were completely stationary and had nothing whatsoever to do with their run game. I mean, was he saying that Rodgers can't run a stretch play? It was I was very confused what he even meant. I thought Rodgers looked good in this game for the most part. Yes, he did. Does he have a few throws he would want back? He does. But you know what? If you watched that Thursday night game last week, the opening game with Patrick Mahomes also had about a few throws that he wants back. He threw a pick. He almost threw a second pick over the middle. If he had not been able to catch the batted ball himself, he overthrew a pass to the running back. He made a couple of other not great throws. That's what happens. Quarterbacks miss throws from time to time. I really only thought there were maybe two really bad. I mean, there was the interception where he double clutched and then he threw it too far inside. And then there was one other play where, on the fourth down play where he threw it low to Garrett. And again, I think he threw it a little too late. Maybe you could say there was one other throw where he anticipated Lazard getting a little, again, it was further in the down, meaning he had already looked, but Lazard was moving. He threw it further out in front of Lazard. And he missed. I don't know if that was inaccurate or if he expected Lazard to be further out. I'm not sure which one happened there exactly. But basically, I counted 3 throws that Rodgers, wasn't precise with. Everything else, he was fine. Yes, he had one deep ball where Garrett got held up on the route. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked crisp. He made a great throw down the sideline to Lazard. He had that back, that over the top throw to Garrett, getting the ball out quickly. It's not his fault that Brees fumbled. It's not his fault that Brees dropped a pass. It's not his fault that Lazard dropped a pass. I don't know. And it's not his fault that Garrett didn't get his second foot down, which is probably the worst case of someone not getting their feet down that I've ever seen. And so, again, I think Rodgers played pretty well. Obviously, at only 21 passes, he had 167 yards. But again, he averaged 8 yards per attempt. Obviously helped out a lot by the 36-yard touchdown on the free play. But I don't know. I thought he played well. And if he played like this, if you think about it, if we just had Aaron Rodgers play like this last year, Jets would have won 11 games. Thank you very much. Thanks, Adam. NY Sportsbooker Media. Check out his channel. I assumed it wasn't the greatest time, and maybe that's why we don't have so many people in here. But yeah, and I also want to get off to watch the game, so I won't be on here that long. But I figured I'd talk to you guys. Yeah, okay. To go to, you said 38-20 Jets. They better end up with that kind of score, and we'll talk about that a little more. You said 7-up Dolphins. So I saw that Nick Fario, one of the Jets, beat reporters, he was talking about how the Jets should be rooting for the Dolphins in this game because you want that Week 18 game to come down to the division. I'm not sure about that. I actually think that it's impossible to know who to root for in September. But if you think about it, the Dolphins have an in-conference win and the Bills have an out-of-conference win. So in that sense, you prefer the Bills to win because you don't want the Dolphins to have 2 in-conference wins. Again, it's way too early to be thinking about this. It could happen that they'll come down to Week 18 and the Dolphins will have division wrapped up, and then it'll be a wild card thing. And they wish that it's just impossible to know because so much depends on whether the Jets are in division position or wild card position. So, for example, Week 1. Patriots, Bengals. Now, really, you don't want anyone in your division to win. You always want the team in your division to lose. But you look at the Patriots; they're so bad. Let's root against the other AFC team that might be in position for a wild card. The problem is just too early in the year for that. You can't even the Patriots, even as bad as we think they are. Now that they beat the Bengals, especially, people are realizing that their defense is better than they thought, than other people thought. We've seen Jacoby Brissett put his team into position to win twice against the Jets in the last 2 years. And so you just can't overlook any team. And I'm not sold on rooting for one team over another. I know it's considered very unsportsmanlike to root for injuries, but if I was playing the team next week, I would certainly hope that at least a few of the players would be out. Other than that, look, I'll just watch it and I'll watch a game and I don't really know who I root for. I'll just be happy that either one lost. Maybe root for a tie. I don't know. Anyways, but talking about, I titled this thread, this podcast, talking about just how blow them out. And basically, I think that's what the Jets have to do to get the bitter taste of San Francisco out of their mouths. They can't just eke out a win. They can't win 24-20 or 24-17 or anything like that. They need to win, I think, by at least 2 touchdowns. And that's not meant as disrespect to Tennessee, because I actually think that the problem I have is that I'm worried that the Jets are not going to blow out the Titans. Because, again, the Titans have a pretty good run defense. They have a pretty good running game. And that was kind of the recipe that San Francisco used to beat the Jets. I mean, obviously Brock Purdy also, played a very solid game, but ultimately it was run defense and 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 running game that beat the Jets last week. And obviously the Titans are not the 49ers, but again, they showed that capability again, obviously against the Bears defense, but the Titans already had, again, their run defense ranked 10th in DVOA last year already. So it's not an unusual thing for them to have a good run defense. And then, I mean, look, we've seen Tony Pollard in the past. He didn't have a great year last year, but we've seen him put together some very strong games in the past. And so I don't think the Jets can sleep on the Titans, and they really need to come out there and show something. And to go to your saying, this Jets team is still not better than the Bills of Miami. Now, you hope that they would be, and you still hope they can be, but certainly it looks like without John Franklin Myers, without Hassan Reddick, they really, really look weak. And then, you thought that the run blocking would be the strength of their team and Breece Hall would go off. I could still hope that, but I mean, that was a really, really bad start. And that was something I was not expecting at all, especially since the 49ers run defense was mediocre at best. So I really think the Jets, they really need to come out there and just smack the Titans around. Look, Will Levis, not only is the Titans offensive line not very good in terms of pass blocking, they're not good in run blocking either, but specifically pass blocking. They also, you also have one of the quarterbacks who's one of the most sack-prone and pressure-prone quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, basically when you have – so there's a lot of statistics that show that pressure rates and sack rates tend to follow quarterbacks from college to the NFL, and they tend to remain at least somewhat stable over time. What that means is if you have a quarterback who took a lot of pressures and a lot of sacks in college, a lot of times they will continue to take a lot of pressure and a lot of sacks in the NFL. Pressure and sacks are not completely, but to a large extent, they are a quarterback stat. I mean, remember, Tom Brady couldn't move at the end of his career, and yet he was very, very difficult to sack because of his decision-making. And so Will Levis in college, in his last year in college, he was the fourth most sacked quarterback out of all qualified quarterbacks across college football. And he followed that up in the NFL with a very similar sack rate, very high pressure rate. This past week one, he was the second most pressured quarterback in the NFL. And again, I know that the Bears have a couple of pass rushers up front, but we're not talking about an elite pass rushing class. It's just more that Will Levis holds onto the ball too long, doesn't make good reads, just isn't a good quarterback. And so the Jets need to take advantage of that. They need, if there's any week that they should be able to rack up, 5, 6, 7 sacks, it should be against Will Levis. If there's any week that they should be able to get multiple interceptions, that they should be able to just bottle up the Titans, it should be this week. And if they don't, and if they win, either eke out a win or somehow they get upset and they lose, I would be in full-blown panic territory, because I know it would only be 2 games, but just it's not just about the losing or the way, it's the way you win or lose. And again, that San Francisco game was a terrible, terrible look. Look, San Francisco blew out Dallas last year, 42-10. Dallas had a great defense. So and they had really good offense too. So there's no way to say for sure, okay, you got embarrassed by San Francisco, so now you're going to be terrible. Again, and to a certain extent, it was bad luck that the Jets played them in week 1 when they haven't really had a chance to gel as a team yet. But it's such a bad look and such a bad taste that the Jets really need to come back and assert themselves and show that they're actually a good team and not just a pretender and a roster that thought it was going to be good but can't actually put its pieces together. I mean, look, I was feeling very good about the Jets coming into the season, San Francisco notwithstanding, and now I'm significantly concerned. I think I'm going to be watching this Titan game with a lot more anxiety than I would have been, or I would have thought that I would be before the season. Now, pass blocking was better than the run for the Jets. Yeah, it was. I mean, some of that was Rodgers getting the ball out quickly. Tyron Smith had a bit of a tough game, and I've had some discussions with Jets fans about it. They're like, well, he was facing Nick Bosa. Look, but Tyron Smith is supposed to be a top 3, 4, 5 left tackle in the game. He's supposed to be one of the best pass blockers in the game. I expect Tyron Smith to go one-on-one with Nick Bosa and stop him most of the time. Yeah, okay, he gave up 1 sack. But, I mean, he gave up 4 pressures in the game. It wasn't just Nick Bosa. Leonard Floyd got the better of him a couple of times. I don't think Morgan Moses had a very good game either. I think he got bailed out sometimes by Rodgers getting rid of the ball quickly. I think the interior pass blocking was very good, which is good to see because, I mean, in a way, I was more concerned about the interior pass blocking. I thought the tackles would be more solid. I was more worried about AVT, Tittman, and Simpson, but they did a good job of pass blocking, was weird because I expected them to be better run blockers and they weren't. Stack, yeah, AVT, he didn't just look rusty, he looked terrible. I mean, you would think that you don't forget technique. It wasn't even about explosiveness or anything. It was just bad technique. And so, yeah, I mean, you could just say rustiness and rust, but I on Jets X Factor, we put out a preview article before the season and made a lot of predictions. And one of the predictions we always put out is the most disappointing player. And I chose AVT as my most disappointing player because I was very concerned about him. He barely played over the last 2 seasons. He's coming off an Achilles. It was one thing 2 years ago when he was coming off, or last season he was coming off, a biceps injury, which shouldn't necessarily affect him the following year, but Achilles is a serious injury. And I mean, I wasn't even sure if the Jets should pick up his 5th-year option because of the injuries, and you didn't know what he was going to look like, and that was not a good start at all, especially into run blocking, which was supposed to be his dominant phase of his game. And if he can't put it together against the Titans, and again, the Titans have some pretty good interior run defenders, Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, the rookie, who look pretty good. It's going to be time to start asking questions. Now, to another pick. Yeah, I mean, look, the Jets made, especially in their second game, the Jets made Miami's receivers look like truly dominant receivers. Tua didn't necessarily look great against them in the first matchup, but he looked great against them in the second matchup. I always feel like Tua's stats are better than the quarterback he is, and so and again, he's playing a good team. He generally can't beat a team that's a playoff team or a team that's above 500. And so, I mean, again, just like the Bills, it sounds like are making him look bad right now. Again, I'm not watching the game because I'm on with you guys, but Tua, I mean, again, if you think you're going to be a good team, you have to make Tua look bad. It's just a reality. So you're saying Tua has 2 picks? Yeah, Tua afraid of the Bills? I mean, look, not shocking. It's true they look like they didn't play together before, but that wasn't even it. Because what happened was, particularly with AVT and Tippmann, they just, I mean, it was bad technique. It wasn't even playing together. It wasn't like they weren't passing things off properly. It was just more straight bad technique. I mean, AVT a couple times had a face totally crossed. I mean, he was like basically knocked out of the way. Tippmann couldn't get to the second level fast enough. I think they gave him some tough assignments. I don't know exactly why they ran more zone than gap schemes in this game when gap is really what gashes the 49ers. And also they brought in offensive linemen specifically for gap. But yeah, I mean, I would tend to, normally I would say that, but it was just how each individual player looked, not just how the collective looked. Meaning, like, especially on the interior, when you're talking about combo blocks or passing things off, that's what you expect maybe not to go well when you have rust. But this is just purely like, again, if Joe Tippmann had done the same thing last year, playing next to whoever he played next to Laken Tomlinson, I would have said it wasn't about him or Laken Tomlinson. It was just a bad game from him. Same thing, AVT just one-on-one had nothing to do with gelling as an offensive line. And so, I mean, I don't know if you can just say it was because they didn't play together before. I think it was bad, pure bad play. Now, same old Fins. Again, I just hope those are the Fins that the Jets get to face because, again, like the 49ers, the Dolphins are a bad matchup for the Jets. And, everyone's like, oh, the Dolphins got worse. The Dolphins got worse. I don't know if they did so much because, again, they lost Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt, if you look at the stats, had one of the easiest jobs that an offensive lineman had last year. And he never really had to pass block because Tua gets the ball out so quickly. And so, again, the fact that they lost him, Connor Williams, again, their offensive line almost didn't seem to matter because they had very poor offensive linemen last year. Liam Eichenberg started a bunch of games. Tua was fine. So I don't even know. I mean, again, I'm concerned about those Dolphins matchups with the Jets. I think the Jets don't match up well with them. And I think to be a good team, I mean, by that time, we'll have a little bit more of an idea about the Jets' identity. But I think to be a good team, you need to be able to beat those teams. Dolphins are not the 49ers ultimately, as much as they have a good scheme. And so, I mean, again, I was concerned about the Dolphins too before the season. I'm assuming that's Connor. Hey, Connor, if that's you, because you logged in from your JetX account and not from your personal one. So, hey, Connor, Stack, I appreciate that. Bad things have happened this year when the Dolphins throw to Berrios, Durham Smythe, Grant Dubose, and Robbie Chosen. I mean, yeah, they really should be throwing. I don't know why they should really be throwing to their top receivers. Personally, I love Malik Washington, guy I think they drafted in the 6th round, who they were talking about a 3rd, 4th round pick. I really liked him as a slot guy. I actually liked him better than Malachi Corley. And so I don't know why they're kind of not really using him. again, I didn't watch them, so maybe they did use him, but that's just the impression I'm getting. And then they also have Jonnu Smith. Not that Jonnu Smith is like Travis Kelce, but he's, he has some speed. He's a reasonably, he would fit in their scheme. So again, like another guy who, at least from a fantasy perspective, didn't seem worthwhile when he really should have been beyond Hill and Waddle. And so I don't necessarily know what Miami's, like, what Tua's thought process is. Again, I'm not watching the game right now because I'm on, but I will go watch the game soon. It'll be interesting to see how Tua plays again against the team that is probably going to be over 500. It should be a good team. I mean, I would prefer that the Bills' defense doesn't look good, to be honest, because that was the part of their team that I really thought would not be good or would not be as good. And I don't really want the Bills to look good in general. But again, it's a division game. You have to choose a team to root for. And so, I mean, again, I prefer just that as many parts of both teams look bad as possible. I think that's really all I can say. Now, one thing I noticed and I'll stay on for a few more minutes and then I'll probably go. But one thing I noticed in the Jets' first game, I mean, a lot of Jet fans were very upset about the run pass thing. I understood coming out with it originally, but once they saw the run game wasn't working, which was pretty evident within the first 5 or 6 carries that it wasn't working, I don't want to say completely abandoned it, but they should have stopped running on first down. They should have started using the dump offs because there was some space on some of those shorter passes. I mean, even the play where Brees fumbled, he had gained like 5 yards, and I think it was a first down play. And so 5 yards on first down, even on a screen, it definitely replaces the run game as a good game. And again, after that touchdown drive, the Niners were playing very soft. They played a lot of cover 4. They played very soft, played back. And so those shorter dump offs should have been there to replace the run game, and the Jets just didn't use it enough, particularly actually on second down. Like, they'd have a 2nd and 7 and they run the ball again. Like, what on earth are you doing? Can we just get a pass, and specifically a pass at least close to the sticks, if not past the sticks? It was very frustrating. Hard to know how much of it was Hackett and how much was Rodgers. I think Rodgers deserves the benefit of the doubt more than Hackett does. But again, I mean, game planning on both sides of the ball, not good. We need to see better against the Titans. I honestly want to see Rodgers throw for 250, 300 yards against the Titans. I want to see them sack Will Levis 5-6 times. I really think that they need to make a statement in this game. And I'm not going to give a score prediction. I mean, I have to pick a win. Although in my survivor pools, I am not picking the Jets this week because I am too nervous about them. But I think the Jets need to win something like 27-13, 30-16, even more. I mean, that 38-20, I wouldn't even like to give up 20 points to the Titans. It would be great if they could just pull off a 47-3 like they did against the Rams. I believe it was in 2008. Yeah. Now, Stack, that's a good point. 23 games in a row without a 300-yard pass game for Rodgers. Now, the one thing I would say is he averaged 8 yards per attempt against San Francisco, which means he would have needed, well, that still means 38 pass attempts. I mean, it takes a lot to, I mean, 8 yards per attempt is excellent. And so in that sense, it takes a lot of pass attempts usually to get to 300 yards unless you really air it out. And I don't think that that's what Rodgers has been looking to do for his last couple of seasons. He's looking to be more efficient than necessarily to be explosive. That's kind of been his MO. And so, I said 300 yards. I'd be fine with 250. Again, my main thing with him is he's efficient. He looks good. He's scoring. Again, I said the yardage. I care less about the yardage than I do just about how he looks. And again, I thought he looked fine against San Francisco. I wouldn't say he played an elite game, but I thought he looked very solid. Definitely, I don't think you could expect much more in a small sample size in his first game back. And so I just want to see him build on that. Again, the Titans corners didn't have a very good game last week, despite the fact that Caleb Williams had only 93 yards passing. They kind of were a little leaky in terms of their coverage, and so they have big names. But I want to see Garrett Wilson. I mean, okay, L'Jarius Sneed ate Garrett Wilson's lunch last year. You should go back watch that game. There was one play where he jammed him like totally out of his socks, and so you have to see Garrett be able to beat L'Jarius Sneed, be able to beat Chidobe Awuzie, who again seems like he's a little bit on the slight decline, and so they need to be able to win, particularly in the pass game. Now, I also want to see that run game get going. But I'm concerned, especially about, with Tennessee's run defense. Now, Matt said, hi, Matt. Thanks for joining. It says, this is Aaron's personal coordinator, and he's calling most of the plays. Any issues with scheme comes back to him. So you're talking about Hackett, I assume. Now, the one thing I will say is that Rodgers audible, he looked like he was audibling quite a bit, and he seemed to have audible, like, considering that the 49ers were playing a lot of too high, I think he may have kept audibling into runs. It's possible because he saw the soft thing, but he probably should have stopped doing that in the middle. He should have just started passing. At some point, you have to pass into too high, especially like they were running way too deep in this game. They're down, 3 scores or 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions, and they're still running the ball on first down. Like, what on earth are you doing? You've got to start opening it up. And so I don't know if that was a Rodgers thing or a Hackett thing. I think that Rodgers might take a little bit more of the blame than you would think, only because it looked like he was audibling a lot. And the thing is also, there was one play he mentioned, I think it was, I don't know if it was in the post game or the following day, but he was talking about where he had completed a pass to Garrett over the middle. And what he was saying was that he had audibled Garrett's route to an inbreaker, and there was another inbreaker right underneath, and he didn't think it was a very good pass combination. So when he completed the ball to Garrett, he had a little smirk on his face. And I actually saw the smirk. I was wondering why he was smirking, and that was why. He said he was smirking because he didn't think the play was going to work. But in that case, that kind of tells you that it could be that some of the issues in the scheme come back to Rodgers and not just Hackett. Ultimately, I'm more inclined to blame Hackett because, again, Hackett has not earned the benefit of the doubt and Rodgers has. But I'm just pointing out that there's a possibility that some of that was on Rodgers and not on Hackett. I totally agree. Hackett. I mean, look, I'm not inclined to give Hackett any sort of leeway. I don't like Nathaniel Hackett. I wish they'd never hired him. Frankly, I had written before the Jets fired Mike LaFleur that they should fire him, but that was before I saw who they were replacing him with, because Mike LaFleur was a world's better offensive coordinator than Nathaniel Hackett. And so, yeah, I totally agree. I'm just making the point that some of the run stuff may have come from Rodgers. Now, our run was 5.1 and Niners was 5.4. We were in there. Why don't you think Saleh didn't challenge the Brees first down? Yeah, that I don't understand. I mean, they kept showing it on the TV. I know I was watching with the sound off because I just cannot stand them fawning over players. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why he didn't challenge that. There were a couple of plays, but specifically that one. I've noticed over the last few years that officials have been very, very willing to put balls short, like all the time where it looks like a guy got a first down and they call it 2nd and 1, or a guy looks like they got the first down and they call it short. It seemed pretty clear that Brees got that first down. It looked pretty clear on the original look. Forget about replay. Saleh should have challenged that, especially once he got a look at it. I'm assuming that he thought, we'll get it on 2nd and 1. It doesn't matter, but I'm sorry. That had to be challenged. Ultimately, Garrett had to get his foot down on that 2nd down play. The 3rd down play, the blocking was, atrocious. People kept saying, Braylon Allen should have been there. I'm sorry. Jerome Bettis, Derrick Henry, whoever's your preferred big explosive back, whatever, big short yardage back, none of them were running for the first down there. It was literally stuffed up. He was running straight into the back of his blocker. And so that was not Brees' fault. Ultimately, that was the offensive line's fault. And obviously Rodgers threw it too late on the 4th down, threw it too low. But that first down, I still think Saleh should have challenged it. Are they scared to get rid of Hackett because of Aaron? Absolutely. Otherwise Hackett would have been out of here. That's pretty obvious. Hackett was considered one of the better quarterback coaches before he became an OC. Look, it's possible. I know his dad was also pretty well respected around the league, but Jets fans hated him. My first year as a Jet fan was 2004. I think that was Paul Hackett's last year, or maybe it was 2005, was his last year as the Jets offensive coordinator. And again, just because, I think it's the Peter principle, which is people always end up one level in it's an administration, like industrial psychology type of thing, but it's basically like people always end up in a position one level above where they're competent. So for example, you have someone who did very well as a manager, then they promote them to a higher position and the person doesn't do well. Because what happens is you keep getting promoted until you're at a point where you're not good anymore. And so that happens a lot in the NFL when you're talking about coordinators becoming head coaches, right? Like we've said with Saleh, he may just be a very good defensive coordinator who's never going to succeed as a head coach. And so the same thing could be true of Hackett. Maybe he was a very good quarterbacks coach who can't call plays. It could be that he knows, again, quarterbacks coaching is a lot about as much about, again, it's not designing the play as much as, making reads and things like that. So it could be he was a very good quarterbacks coach, but his track record as a play caller has been subpar, to put it mildly, and last year just emphasized it after what happened in Denver. Matt, so you're saying it's mostly Rodgers. Yeah, in the sense that Rodgers is the one who brought in Hackett. It is mostly Rodgers. Ultimately, Hackett is calling the plays, so I'm not sure you can say that it's all Rodgers. I just don't know what percentage is what. I think a lot of Jet fans were inclined to blame Hackett for the play calling when a lot of it may have been Rodgers. Yeah, Hackett is definitely Rodgers' fault too. And then Harlan, he better go back to that job because he's clearly over his head. I mean, yeah. I would suspect if this doesn't work out that Hackett will never get another. I mean, forget about offensive coordinator. I mean, maybe he'll get a quarterbacks coach job, but I'm assuming he's done as an offensive coordinator after this because I can't imagine that anyone in the NFL would look at Hackett's track record, especially back-to-back years with Denver and the Jets, and say that he deserves to be an offensive coordinator ever again. On that note, okay, we have one more. As an OC, Hackett led 3 teams to the AFC title game. He didn't lead the teams to the AFC title game. They got there, despite him. Again, Blake Bortles was not very good. They got to the AFC championship game primarily on the strength of their defense that year. It was not because of Hackett. I don't give Hackett credit for those things. And so on that note, I think I'm going to finish off. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to jetsxfactor.com. Discount code 80. Subscribe to all Jets X Factor podcasts, including the Scoreboard podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for joining. You can go back to watching Thursday Night Football and have a great night.